So, we have a very special episode of Film Critters Processes for you today, but a quick preamble first. As will become pretty obvious, this episode was recorded prior to the brutal murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police. Since then, there have been international protests against the overfunded and heavily militarized police, the brutality of their extrajudicial overreaches, and the countless lives lost at their corrupt hands, specifically centering on George Floyd and other black Americans such as Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade.
We, as Americans, encourage and implore you to seek out the short-term ways you can demonstrate a demand for accountability and reform from our racist institutions. Whether that be protesting, donating to bail funds, screaming at lawmakers through every channel of communication they offer, anything you can do to help this movement in this moment is valued, as well as keeping a fire for the long-term solutions to endemic racism and its exercise through state violence that also need to be fought for.
Because these solutions are best pioneered by those who have felt the weight of this violence the most, in the description there will be a link to a Google Drive directory containing writing by black revolutionaries, work that, if you're unfamiliar with, will be helpful to become familiar with. Below that, there will also be a link to a national bail fund that allows you to split your donation between several cities nationwide, as well as a Black Lives Matter curated list of other places where donations have been requested, including direct support for victims and their families. People are being detained by the thousands in their fight for a better world, and they need your help.
No matter what happens, do your best to protect your community, starting with its black members. This can be financially, but it also can be through material support and resources for protesters, physical presence at demonstrations, even something as simple as providing safe locations for them to retreat from police escalations. You can also support them personally, as the people in your life who are most affected by this can tell you what they need far better than we can. If you know your history, you'd know that permissiveness of state violence on the part of anyone will lead us down a very, very dark path. Keep up the fight, keep up the pressure. We urge you to demand equity, accountability, and liberation for your communities, and we urge you to do it now. Hi!
Hi!
Welcome to another episode of Film Critters Processes.
I'm Jay Bearhat.
I am Baru, and we have a very, very special episode today. I invited somebody on who wrote, basically I invited on Gabby, well, actually, how do you want to go, like, what do you want to be credited as?
That's fine.
Okay.
Just the Twitter pump is good. You can call me Gabby. I don't care. I don't give a shit.
All right, I've already dropped the intro, but yeah, we have Gabby as our special guest today.
What's up?
Gabby is one of those people who does like a lot of different shit, and all of it's really, really cool. She recently wrote a just a really good long description of basically global, I don't know how you would describe it, just global shit that has happened for the past few generations and why we're in our current situation, more or less. It's called Welcome to Your Life, and it's really good.
I believe the industry term is effort post. It's a very big effort post.
Effort post.
Yeah,
Sometimes
see, there we go.
I take time out of fun posting and shit posting to effort post.
But still with a twinge of shit post. With just the little seasoning.
But yeah.
But yeah, Gabby has a really good perspective on just, the fucking weird ass world that we live in. And she also is really, really knowledgeable on deep internet lore. If there's a reason that huge scare quotes furries are cool now, Gabby is one of the progenitors of furry becoming what it is today. I would say
That's so glowing. Okay.
one of the major voices. But fuck all that shit.
Fuck all that shit.
Gabby, how you doing? First and foremost,
I'm great. I'm just sitting in a mess and a Athenius, Athanasius Kircher's, like a book. I just have a book and alcohol with me.
Yeah.
That's my
cool.
life.
Hell yeah.
I've got my Monster Ultra on my on my sides and my thermos covered in stickers.
I've got a Red Bull, a kiwi Red Bull.
I've got
Ooh.
an ashtray of half-smoked joints here, and a lot of just ash and dirt in it.
Nice.
These are our Wojak spaces for any that feel when images are
We really need to
detritus.
paint this image for our episode about
About the Wojak
TFW
culture.
no GF that we're doing here.
Yeah. So that's we actually we invited Gabby on because we are talking about the infamous documentary, the online documentary.
It's pretty I guess it's infamous.
TFWNOGF, or That Feel When No Girlfriend, by Alex Moyer, I think is her name.
Yeah.
Alex Lee Moyer, yeah.
And Gabby and I talked a lot about it, and we really like Gabby's perspective on it, so we brought her on.
Yeah.
Gabby, when did you watch this film actually?
When did I watch it?
Yeah.
Well, it was supposed to debut at South by Southwest, but the virus fucked that up like everything else.
Yeah.
It was released on for like some of those like films to debut there were put onto Amazon Prime, but then I realized that it's just region locked to the States, so I downloaded it. You can
yes.
have me on record for saying that I pirated it.
Sorry, Alex.
I definitely, air quotes, legally watched the film, and then legally had a Discord screening with a bunch of furries. So I've seen it like 2.5 times now.
It's fun watching, especially with a group of people who are all like either current or ex, channers.
Yeah.
Or just anyone who's like familiar with internet shit.
Yeah, the first like few seconds of the film, it was already just like an absolute heater because it just started with this like Penderecki strings of just like, but it's like over these like shitty MS Paint Wojak memes, which was like the funniest juxtaposition I could have ever imagined.
I fell in love with it the moment that it opened up and there's a guy lifting to a Renisticulation, like the anime song. I always hear it like remixed with Quad City DJs like tracks.
My favorite part of like the sound editing in that scene too is that when he lifts it, it gets like louder, but then like whenever he like starts to like drop the weight, it like ducks down in audio, so you can hear him like straining and grunting with the weights. It's such a good little detail. It also opens with a close up of a Halo poster in his room, and then a shot of him holding a phone, showing the camera the infamous Hackers on Steroids video.
Oh, God. Of course.
Oh, my God. That also made me really happy.
I watched that, and I wonder if, like, people like that, like, the subjects of the film are, like, the sort of people who found out about 4chan through that video.
We were actually arguing that, like, at my house, too, because, like, I know one of them says that he had been on 4chan since he was, like, 12, but he also, like, definitely was like significantly younger than me, so it's like, okay, but like when you were 12, that could easily have been like when I was leaving 4chan because I was in college.
Yeah, also people can just lie. there's obvious like social currency for internet shitheads to say that you've been browsing X, Y, and Z for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, like, I don't know. It's very weird. First of all, that I was very happy to see that Hackers on Steroids clip. That was like seeing an old friend again. But it's weird to have there just be this like generation that's like, of 4chan users that are like younger than me, I guess.
Yeah, because that's also the other thing, because it doesn't necessarily seem or feel like the 4chan movie to me than it does the Robot 9000 movie. And like a lot of like older channers derided and talk shit about Robot 9K because of all the sad posting teenagers.
Right.
Yeah, that was partially why I was always like trying to figure out what generation of Channer they were, because they all talk about R9K, but like R9K came out when I was in college, and I remember it being a thing where people would say like, "Oh, that's the Reddit of 4chan."
Essentially,
yeah. I remember R9K being kind of looked down upon. Like if you were ever on B and they were talking about R9K, it was like, I don't know. It was like became like immediately a very depressing place.
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people considered people on there to be cringe, because I think like a lot of like specifically older Chan people, they're less like the subjects of that movie and more like, you know, candy kids and DJs who go to Anime Expo. You know, it's like they're different sort of people, but one's being popularized as like, you know, the 4chan person, because it is a big fucking place.
It really is. And that's kind of the sort of subject of my first hot take, I guess, about this movie that I'd like to place on the table, is that it kind of, you know, really tries to minimize its like subjects or like kind of easily categorize them into this category of incel, when like the subjects in this movie, like the movie's kind of a mixed success, because the subjects end up being like the people in the movie just end up being like bigger than that concept, and they can't really just be pigeonholed and just like tucked away in that way. And like the whole point, I guess, that the movie is trying to make is that they shouldn't be also. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it kind of plays in that space of trying to kind of, you know, categorize them, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It uses them trying to be as like a humanized face for a culture, but it's of a culture that's like way too broad to pick just like 3 to 4 kind of similar-ish dudes and be like, these guys are the face of this movement. Because it's like, no, they're the face of like a specific subsection of that movement. Like they all have Twitter accounts. Is like a bit like that's a critique I've actually been seeing a lot from like 4chan-y type of people, is that they're like, oh, like these guys all have Twitter accounts. Like Twitter is cringy and normie, and these guys are just depressed normies.
I noticed that Twitter has become like more of the cultural nexus for specifically this. I guess I should just say the subject of the film. It's definitely like it was mentioned in the film, but like the nature of like aphorisms and the nature of the platform kind of encourages. It has like the feel and vibe of like very brief quips on threads on 4chan. So as like a social media site, there is like that that tonal or textural sort of like translation. And of course, it's not like Instagram or like Facebook where it's like, you know, your real identity is tied to it. And, you know, if the internet is going to continue Walmartifying, it makes sense that these people would move to Twitter.
Yeah. Well, Twitter is kind of the least sanitized out of the new sort of like social media.
Because Jack just doesn't give a fuck.
Jack only cares about the number going up.
Jack just wants to eat his lunch of like 3 pieces of sawdust and like 2 gallons of Soylent and live in his merry little ranch. And I think people should let him. Yeah, so with regard to the subjects of this movie, we have I don't know how many people. It was like 4 characters in this movie, I guess you would say, right?
There's the Washington. Are they brothers or just friends?
Oh, they're friends. They're like, I don't know if it was in the movie. It feels like they met through R9K, but maybe they're just like, I don't know. But anyway, their 2 names are Sean and Charles.
Okay, yeah.
So and they live over in Kent.
The Kent Washington boys.
Yeah, and then there's
Shout
Sean
out to
Guy, the Texan whose name I'm completely blanking on.
I think it's Kyle.
Kyle.
I wrote this down because I rewatched it, and I figured it would be important to have their names on hand.
I appreciate it because I would have just been like the Texan, the weightlifter, the Washington boys.
I don't know anything about the weightlifter. He just he's the scariest out of all of them, I feel.
Oh, really?
And then there's Campbot, and to a lesser extent, Egg Boy,
Egg Boy.
Oh my God, Egg Boy.
Yeah, let's just call him Egg Boy from now on.
Those are like the more minor characters who kind of round out our cast, but it definitely focuses more on Sean and Charles, and then to a lesser extent Kyle and the other Sean.
Mm-hmm. Like there's a bit which I know about, like the background of this film. There's not a lot. I don't think a lot of it I can't really say on podcasts, but I can definitely safely say that this movie came about from a short film project specifically about Sean, I think. So that's why it begins and really kind of grows out of, Sean as like the entrance point. Which makes sense because as it goes on, it gets weaker, I feel.
Yeah. No, it kind of tries to tie in.
It loses focus.
A lot of different ideas. I think probably like the biggest thing is honestly like I think it probably would have been better if it either had focused on just Sean or even like just the Washington boys. Is like it brings in a lot of like other people into it, but a lot of those people's like stories don't necessarily add too much because they all kind of echo each other's.
Yeah, that's why I like Sean and Charles, because they are definitely like the every doomer man. Like, there's so many people who are just like them. My ex-roommate dated someone just like that, and yeah, it's like they are the Wojak. They have the same texture as Wojak.
They are the people where like every time I've shown this movie to people, they've been like, "Oh, those are the guys that are like, oh, that could have been me."
That could have been me. Yeah, because I feel.
Oh my God.
This movie captures one half of this, black pill pipeline, because I feel you either, start lifting and, you swallow it up and then maybe have a crisis when you're 40 or 50, and that's like one path. And the other path is, you just become really gay.
So, yeah, I guess that's a good way to kind of pivot into talking, like, for one thing, okay, like the Texan guy in the movie, I thought he was the most relatable in both the sense of like I could have been that, but also like I hung out with him, when I lived in my home state,
right,
and was closeted. But yeah, we are all. This is a roundtable symposium of people who have of ex-channers who have transitioned and become very, very, very gay hedonists, and just kind of. And I'll speak to my own personal like. I mean, obviously, there's like the very, very central thing of just like it was not going to, like, my life as it was as a channer and just as the person that I was not going to work for a lot of reasons. But the canary in the coal mine was kind of noticing the sort of like noxious fumes of the like mental illnesses of everybody that I was surrounding myself with in those days. Right. And I don't know if that's something that other people can relate to. But
yeah, the interesting thing is that 4chan began as kind of like an offshoot from something awful, specifically for weeaboos, or weeaboo, which is an amazing concept coined by WT Snacks, which means just basically an anime nerd, a white anime nerd specifically. I mean, maybe not, but and so it has that. So old 4chan has that old energy of just 15-year-olds dicking around and being huge weebs, and then obviously there's this darker injection. Obviously there's like a collision with like really online like gamers and like really angry like repress people who don't necessarily just like anime. Because there's one thing I noticed about the anime fandom is a lot of those people grow out of it, like in like before their early 20s. Like it always cycles out as like, young people. However, there's like a huge contingent of people who stick around, and I don't know, I like contrasting like the anime fandom to the furry fandom, because one obviously has a lot of people coming in and maturing and growing with it, and the whole thing growing and kind of like in that direction. The other one stays in a really relatively juvenile state. So I think you had like a lot of gamers and like repressed people come into 4chan later and like twist the community into this darker sort of way. And then of course, like a decade ago, like places like Stormfront literally strategized and did a psyop to like change the energy of the libertarian platform into a white nationalist one.
Was that like in response to the Hal Turner stuff?
No, not necessarily. I was actually just talking to someone recently about this because he's writing a book on 4chan history, and I'm like one of his sources. But like before Poll, there's like different boards like N and New, and very early on, it like Moo got rid of like the first iteration because it was racist. Which is more about the issue of like retaining like advertisers than any like moral thing. But I think very quickly, because like early on, there's like 4chan was more like Ron Paul and like libertarian, like classical, air quotes, classical liberal. It definitely is that sort of energy. And I specifically remember seeing threads where people would link to Stormfront, and there's people in there being like, this is an anonymous board, they're all just like really disaffected youth, and if there's one thing white nationalists are really good at, it's taking advantage of disaffected, hurting people, like young boys specifically. And that's exactly what they did. They came up with like rhetorical slogans, and they just pumped 4chan full of it. And, they have all the time in the world because they're just, basic, internet racists.
Yeah.
And everything kind of went from that. I think I'd say that was around 2010, 2011 that happened.
Oh, okay. That makes sense then, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, I actually never knew that there was like a specific injection of Stormfronters into it.
It was very deliberate.
That actually makes it interesting because, like, I want to say probably around then was when I knew someone who was like an old school like encyclopedia or had been an old school encyclopedia dramatic admin. And I remember getting really drunk with them one night and kind of like talking to them and asking them about it, and them telling me essentially like, yeah, it was really weird watching this like kind of turn overnight from like stuff that we would say and do just to be like edgy shitheads. And it wasn't like he was unaware of like shitty things they did. Like he would own up to it. But he's like, it's like this weird turn from that to like people saying it and then like realizing like, oh wait, no, you're like serious about this now. Like this isn't a thing you're saying just to like shock normies or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I didn't really know about that because there's just so many self-perpetuating like mindsets that proliferate themselves on 4chan, like the NPC thing drives me crazy just because it's
that means you're an really NPC.
That means I'm an NPC. Oh my god, I'm an NPC. Oh my god, you guys can stop listening to anything I have to say now, and I'm easily
the bimbofication is complete.
I love the I actually loved the NPC theory when it came out because I was like, oh, I've been saying as a joke for years that like this type of person is someone who doesn't think that other people, like literally thinks other people are NPCs and don't have internal thoughts. And now they're just saying, I don't think other people are real people or have internal thoughts and are NPCs. And it's like, cool. I don't have to insult you with that anymore. You're just going to say it for me.
Yeah, just the really like missing the mark on, other people having interiority and
Just like let's fully regress back to the stage where like a kid will interrupt you on the phone, because if he can't hear somebody on the phone, then that means that you can't hear anybody on the phone.
Solipsism is the house special of many parts of 4chan. It's actually really interesting because like the political nature, the well understood political nature of 4chan is mostly, air quotes, mostly contained to Poll, which was originally created as a literal quarantine board. You go anywhere else and it's like people will literally tell people to go back to Poll. If they
that is true,
start
actually.
Bullshit. I think one of the most interesting things is that Poll actually is relatively a diverse board. I think one of the most interesting case studies of that was the He Will Not Divide Us protests, and it was like mobbed by a lot of like 4chaners, Poltards, whatever, like, and you can see on cameras they're showing up, like there's like people of different ethnicities, like there's like figures like Base Jesus, who is a Saudi national who's now a WWE wrestler, which is fucking phenomenal.
What?
Yes, no, I'm not even joking.
Christ.
If you go on the YouTube and you search, I don't know, that was like early 2017. This was happening because, like, you know, liberal everywhere was having a meltdown. Like their understanding of the narrative had completely collapsed, and Shia LaBeouf,
Yeah.
did like a protest where he put up a camera where everyone just in a drone would just be like, "He will not divide us," like rocking back and forth in a very, you know, normal way. And because it's a live stream in
one
a
of the
big
most
city,
cringe moments in history.
4chaners found it and immediately started like just memeing in front of it. And Base Jesus is the guy who actually he's from the TV board, and you can tell because when he would show up, he'd reenact iconic terrible cinema. Like he did a one-person bit for like 6 minutes in front of the camera, reenacting the entire Dark Knight Rises like intro or whatever the fuck that movie is, the one where, you know, with Bane and stuff.
The Bane posting thing, yeah.
Yeah, he'd like run in a circle, like imitating the plane when it would cut away to like an establishing shot or something. So,
Oh my god.
that's the interesting thing, because Poll itself defies the stereotypical categorization of it being a white nationalist platform. It functions as that, but it also isn't at the same time. It's a contradictory space.
That cringe-ass Shia LaBeouf experiment was great, and the best part was, or rather my personal favorite, was when Austin Walker like walked up right in front of like Will Smith's son and just like delivered a monologue on like leftist, basically this like leftist monologue, and then just dipped. That was fun. I don't know. That was the most like weird cringe like installation thing that I've seen.
I think
ever.
it was really great and caps off that brief interlude from 2016 until, you know, whatever calloused state our society is at now.
Right.
Which is really interesting because tfwnogf, there's a Twitter user who's in the same class, I'd say, as Cantbot. I think it was Logo Dayless. He made like a tweet, which I feel is like pretty accurate in saying like this, the release of this movie is like the capstone or like the end of that cultural moment.
I kind of feel that way, yeah.
Like, because even though the movie meanders, it definitely shows them growing out of it and doing their own fucking thing. And, you know, maybe it fails as a you know, a critique or whatever the fuck, you know, Moyer wanted to do with it, but it definitely exists as a point on our, you know, on our timeline to say that, you know, this, you know, historical moment has more or less come to an end, and, you know, whatever else comes next.
2016 was really the meltdown May of our Holy Roman Empire. But like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, and we kind of just like have to move forward and have to expand our understanding of politics and of inclusion of every class of people to kind of loop in, not in spite of themselves, loop in people who are so outside of the general discussion, because that's the kind of general, like, sort of anti-liberal sentiment is that a lot of people are being sort of left out of and being left out of this, like, global discussion. And I think what we're waiting for people to kind of the ways that we're waiting for people to kind of expand that and to expand on their own feelings about that is for, like, I'm waiting for people to bring, like, class consciousness to that. And tfwnogf kind of steers in that direction a little bit, where it's like,
I don't think it's overtly mentioned, but there's a huge class component about it, especially when you see the context of these people, the subjects' lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they have nowhere to go, and, like, that's kind of the largest the way in which I can most sympathize with them, because, like, sometimes you are just, like, stuck with abusive parents or, like, an abusive family, and there's nothing to do in the world other than go to the mall. And, like, there's no community, there's no guidance, there's, and you don't get positive or negative attention, you don't get any attention, so you have to fucking act up and shit.
There's another aspect of it too that I think the film kind of, like, glosses over, and I really wanted to know more about it because it sticks out to me every time it goes over it. With Kyle the Texan, he mentions that he had friends, but that they've all died of, like, drug overdoses and suicide, and, like, that's why he's in this culture now. And it's like, that is, like, for, like, Midwest, like, young adults, that is, like, a story I've heard, like, so many times. It's like, oh yeah, I had 2 or 3 friends and, like, sometimes it's like, oh, they got married and had a kid, and so, like, now we don't hang out. But, like, a lot of times it's like, and then, like, they died, like, deaths of despair.
Yeah.
Unironically, I think the incel experience is almost kind of queer. Like, I can't think of any other category of the population which deals with such intense alienation and people close to them, of their group, their friends and whatever, committing suicide and self-harming, as much as, like, that group of people.
Well, they're abject, right? And we talk about this concept of, like, the abject sometimes in our annoying ass videos, where the abject is just, like, what, it's whatever you want to push away, because you self-define by what you're able to pull in term, kind of theoretically, and sort of, like, you're basically like a Katamari, but you want to just avoid the bad shit and the shit that leads to death and despair. And now that there's this, like, insane cultural panopticon of the internet that has just suddenly been unveiled, we're all kind of recognizing, like, that, there is no depiction of reality that we've been served that matches up with, like, what is actually happening, the stakes of, the, like, class separation in our country, and the real life, just, like, day-to-day stakes that people are experiencing, like, there's just, it's literally, it's just a panopticon, and it just makes everybody feel outside of the norm of normal, and normal is, rich, having money or whatever.
Yeah, which is something which the movie touches on, is how a lot of these people, and I think, I can't necessarily trust a lot of what the subjects say. One of the big things with the the subjects and that whole class of people is that irony is a main vehicle for communication, but also it's like, I do kind of understand that, them being extremely misogynistic, racist, a lot of it is a joke, specifically because, if we look at it from, like, a class lens, they are living in these places of destitution where, like, the coastal classes have completely robbed most of industrial America, and sent, displaced a lot of work, from America to abroad, like this really wealthy corners of the country are putting upon these people who have nothing, certain manners and, behaviors which they must do, even though they live in like a condition where there's no point to it. Like, they, if you say, as, Texas, grew up in El Paso, like, what does he get for, playing nice and, saying the right things? Like, he will continue being, and like the current discourse in America right now, after 2016 is like getting rid of the Electoral College, which will effectively remove any democratic right from any of these regions which are already suffering in the United States, because these low population areas.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, not to, it's the election of Trump is certainly more complicated than that, but in a backhanded way, it's like, it's a cry for help. It is an unheard class of people that are being strangleholded by, this sort of, being strangled by this air quotes, liberal elite.
The material conditions of the society they live in.
Yeah. in sort of an Occam's razor way, like, yeah. And I think that a lot of people, I don't know, a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid to talk about it. Mm-hmm. We're out there with the real shit. But more to that point, I read Kantbot's reaction to the film.
For the brief moment it was put up there.
Yeah, no, I was like reading it, and then when I like read through like half of it, minimized it on my phone, and then went to read it like later that day, and it was just gone. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh well.
Yeah. What the fuck is up to now?
Still trying to
He
scam.
tried to go to a furry con, right? Okay.
Literally is still scamming. Every time I've looked up to him,
scamming.
He still has some new scam that is just not working out for him at all.
Yeah. I'm not threatened by the alt-right because it has the same issues which the alt-left, the left has, in that something which is juicy and like genuinely insightful new territory for a world historical moment or whatever. You have liberal charlatans taking that and making it as like so it's like if you have like Curtis Yarvin on one end, at the other end is like charlatans like Anino or what's his fuck Still Gray.
Ian.
Oh god,
yeah.
Ian Miles Chong.
Complete boring, useless morons who just take a very threatening ideology and neuter it by turning it into just some brand.
Yeah.
I feel
that's fair.
the alt-right has essentially lost steam. I was actually going to write an effort post about this, that Trump winning is probably the best thing to happen to America, because if Hillary won and if Hillary was sitting on top of this economic collapse, then the past decade and a half would have been blamed on the left, which would have meant someone worse than Trump would have been elected right after. Actually, I'm really surprised. I don't actually not know what the fuck's going on. I don't think anyone knows what the fuck's going on, because this is like the perfect conditions for Bernie to win, but somehow he still got fucked out of nomination, which is outrageous.
I listened to the Seeking Derangements about.
I was about to bring that up. Yeah, I was going to be like, one of the organizers did a good postmortem on it.
Mm. Yeah, they basically, it sounds, I mean, like, it's a huge presidential campaign and a huge historical moment that's really hard to, like, make a single sentence as to, like, why it would pass or fail, but it does paint a picture of kind of, like, misused campaign funds, which, Definitely, like there's like a certain level of like tinfoil hat that I will be willing to do.
Is it in the
with regards to
category of Bernie buying another 5 or 6 more houses or whatever the right says he does?
No, it's in like the same category as like Hillary's campaign advisors giving her really bad advice. It basically was people came onto the Bernie campaign who were just treating it as like another PMC job rather than as like a movement.
Oh man.
That
makes sense.
That's kind of the heart of
yeah.
Ben Moore's critique of it, was that like there were people on the campaign who were like the heart and soul of it. And then there were people who were running things who were very much so just like, well, this is going to look great on my resume and I don't really care if it like succeeds or not.
See, this is why people should have backed Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, the real dark horse of the race.
But yeah,
Honestly, she could still win.
she could here's how Tulsi could still run.
She has the next most delegates. She's second in the race now. Biden's first, Tulsi's number 2. No joke. She could have an upset win at the convention.
That honestly
Oh my God.
would be the best possible outcome.
Aloha! Aloha!
Tulsi invokes some arcane
every-
rule where she can get all the delegates if she can do more push-ups than Joe Biden.
Oh my God. We need to have some shit like that on the books as a country. We're fucking up.
I wanted to circle back on the thing you had said about like queerness sort of innate to these and like the weird sort of parallels that they have to them. When I was screening this on like Discord, the thing that like people kept saying was like, wow, if these guys were just gay furries, they'd be fine.
Fine. They could have been foxy little femboys.
They look like foxy little femboys. I have every single one of them. I could picture.
I've seen people
I could
like
picture
them.
the icon that they would have.
It'd be easy. The transition would be easy. They can get their persona photoshopped into that, that exploitable PNG of like, the coronavirus, like yellow suit for Pepe,
Oh,
But
God.
it's
Those guys.
it's easy. They're
Charles
already
and-
ironically racist. They can just be ironically a furry.
I was even saying like they don't even have to stop being racist. It's not like furries are great at that. So
Oh yeah, that's true.
but it's like a thing. It's a thing
boy.
that made me think about it more, and I realized that's like like a big thing that. And this is another critique I have of the film, is that it with regards to it sort of just taking them at their word, is that it takes them at their word of being like left behind and stuff. And the bad liberal impulse I've seen of it is sort of people being like, well, I was alienated and like I just chose to be a good person. But it's always from someone where it's like, no, you had like a community you could go into.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people forget that. Like, I simply got better. I got over 4chan. It's like, bitch, you can eat friends.
Yeah.
It's like, you became a normie. That's why, you got over it and you went to therapy. It's like, it's not that easy if you're isolated,
Yeah, because it's like ultimately
alienated,
Yeah.
whatever.
being a furry, being queer, being whatever, it's not like you can't fall into like those same things. I made a joke previously about like the incels of the trans community were the bedels.
The what?
But if you like leave the bedels, the Badels,
The Badels.
Bedels.
Badels. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like if you leave the Badels, you've still got a whole
Beetlejuice,
community.
Beetlejuice.
But if you leave like your R9K Twitter account, like you don't got anything else.
R9K Twitter account.
That's
And
true.
So many of those R9K people. I mean, earlier I mentioned that my my ex-roommate dated someone just like in this film. He once told me that he hooked up with a trans girl on Robot 9K.
That sounds really cool. That sounds like it was a really cool event that happened and occurred.
My old
Makes
roommates
him like LGBT.
once
LGBTC, lesbian, gay, bi, transgender, and chaser.
my old
yeah.
roommates once invited a man from R9K into our home.
Oh my god.
And the main things I remember from it was that he kept showing us Sonic memes. and that at one point
Look,
he just
he goes so
casually
fast.
mentioned that he had a restraining order against him.
Oh my god.
Why is everybody on R9K a coworker?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was such a surreal experience. And we're pretty sure that he posted about one of my friends on R9K because they came across a thing where it was like, look up, and then like her full legal name, which is like really rare on Facebook, like total like Asian gamer GF material. And she was like, my Facebook is super locked down, so it could only be somebody who's already on my Facebook, which is this R9K motherfucker I foolishly invited over.
Bro. I will say that there's like a lot of the problems that these dudes kind of seem to have is like as much as they have the personality of like Top Keck, nothing makes me mad. It's just like you are clearly a slave to other people's like perceptions of you and have anxiety.
Yeah, and there just isn't.
Which is like,
they don't have a community to help with that. They have like a death cult, and it's like there's no
Yeah,
real
exactly.
like solution that can be offered to that other than like you help them form communities that like aren't gonna have threads where if you post about how you're suicidal, the top responses aren't gonna be, "Oh, well, kill yourself."
I think what's interesting about the documentary is Campbot even talks about creating a sort of fraternity or a community in that sort of sense.
I will say, like, a part of the problem with sort of talking out a movie like this is that there's a lot we can talk about, like, sort of pulling out the themes of it.
Yeah. Like, tangentially around it, but
I generally have tried to avoid talking about them specifically as individuals beyond, like, scenes in the film that can be talked about. Because it feels weird to have a podcast and analyze like real people who like have like an entire life off screen that can't be like, I could build conjecture out of it, but it's like ultimately I'm not going to know like what these dudes' lives are like actually like, and it feels weird to kind of analyze them. So I can only really talk about like the choices the filmmakers made in terms of like how they're presented.
Exactly. Like how they were utilized for this, and because ultimately it comes down to whatever the fuck, like I don't even know where the fuck Moira was going with this movie.
It's hard to tell. Like
it's a slice of life anime of
I don't know if Moira knows where Moira is going.
Feels like you were saying, Brew, like extremely out of place, not just because of like him having an actual presence, but because it's like it doesn't really feel like he fits with what the thesis that was guiding all the other footage is.
Yeah.
He kind of has his own...
He also breaks the thesis, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because I feel... I think he was necessary in a sense to, like, in a way, contextualize the phenomenon of TFW no GF, because it's not just not having a GF, which is valid, but the introduction of him as a figure, as a character in the film changes it. And I do feel that the film definitely feels that there's a pull and push between him and Moyer's vision of what the film would be. Because it's not like the other subjects of the film necessarily have like, an erudite or, well-read take on, this phenomenon while being part of the phenomenon.
Right.
But it's like, I feel Moira came into this in a kind of like, I don't want to say voyeuristic, but definitely like, ooh, what's this? Ooh.
Yeah.
What is really going on? What are these people really like? It's like a nature documentary.
The whole film does feel like it's...
Yeah. Well, Catbot calls her Jane Goodall.
Well, because like a nature documentary doesn't like, criticize the behavior of the animals at the end. But,
right.
But once Catbot comes into the picture, then it becomes what I feel there is his influence trying to make the film be greater. Because like if there's anything about very scholarly types, is it takes something which is like within 1 hour or however long his film is, and wants to blow it up to the proportions which is quote unquote necessary to contextualize it. I think the film gets lost in this this tonal dichotomy.
Yeah. Like I totally agree, because the part of Catbot's written kind of reaction to the film, A calls her like a Jane Goodall type, because she is like, you know, irregardless of like her, Alex Moyer, like as an individual, the way that she places herself in relation to this documentary and in relation to her subjects kind of implicitly places her as this kind of like coastal liberal who's like has this sort of ladder climbing view of success
Or
that a lot of these men are just incompatible with.
Appeal to that, you know, for
absolutely.
for the hustle of it. You know, once you integrate into Hollywood, there's there's sort of like a way, or there's I don't want to necessarily say a group think, but there's definitely like a dominant ideology that is, you know, for the sake of career, is good to play up to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the kind of the conflict arises in like watching and like seeing people do that, and kind of having a different perspective, having like a different interpretation of like what your rewards would be from that process versus what theirs are. And I think there's kind of a mutual misunderstanding taking place where like, you know, each person kind of treating the other as like the subject of just like, oh, you're obviously like, you're just kind of like hustling and you know, like everybody is fundamentally alone and fundamentally having to like kind of hustle, because that is just like how the dominant paradigm works of like this type of work where everyone is just like, I don't know, like everyone's full of shit and everyone's all alone, fundamentally, you know what I mean? But the kind of stratification of wealth makes it a little bit harder for people to kind of relate or just understand each other's problems, I guess.
For me, like the big tension of that structure too is because the film is definitely made it. A lot of people, I saw a lot of like takes on Twitter from like post-Channer types who are like, this is like the documentary for like for us, but it's like, no, it's pretty clearly like a documentary for South by Southwest.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because like it flirts at these edges of maybe talking about like the larger structural contexts that like produce these people, but then it very much so concludes in that like nice, tidy South by Southwest documentary frame narrative of like an individual story where it's like, oh, but see, like they're all fine. It worked itself out. And it's like, it didn't work itself out by virtue of like one of them got a girlfriend and he's fine now. Like it's just society.
Right.
Society changed in 2 years, and their circumstances changed.
And people change, and that's like very natural. I don't know if y'all got this intro. I watched the movie legally, which was very stupid on my part. But I got like an intro from like an like a South by Southwest co-chair person or something who's like, I really enjoyed this film. It was a delightful and very eye-opening documentary called tfwnogf, or like some like she fucks up the name of it.
The intro,
and she's clearly in this like
the weird intro of the lady in her living room is like, welcome.
She's so quiet. It's so funny to me how she's so much quieter than everything else in the film.
The movie starts like a jump scare.
Yeah.
literally.
Wojak comes up and the audience screams. They grabbed a YouTuber, like I think Princess Zimbabwe or something.
Yeah.
To do everything, to do like the animations and like that all that bullshit.
I wish the movie had more of those and less drone shots, because every drone shot in the film felt like it was like a placeholder for a more interesting shot.
Parts of the film really do feel like it's part of 4 hours of footage of driving in and around, I-5 in Kent. Like, oh, it is a good spot. It is a good spot.
The part where it's
Yeah.
Kyle, I think, in the parking lot, and the camera just like swivels around him while he's like hunched over and looking sad, and I'm just like, what is the vibe of this shot?
God.
What am I supposed to be feeling here?
They're lonely. They wish they had girlfriends. Also reminds when Campbell was talking about like how for the reshoots at the end, that end scene in like, you know, because Campbell doesn't want to go to the house, he'd rather go to like that, you know, the bookstore or whatever, and Moira's insisting like we have to go to Central Park and film you, you know, monologuing all alone, surrounded by all these people, you know, being normal and like playing with their dogs and kids and shit.
Yeah, like really, just a really bonkers decision making, especially like apparently it was fucking cold as shit that day too.
I was gonna say that part of his essay
like
made me understand why that scene felt so weird, which is that he like just looks unhappy. Like he just looks unhappy to be monologuing, but he's supposed to be giving this like big
like
inspiring speech.
The Wojak picture where he's in the back of the party, except it's Central Park and it's Campbot and there's a mess of hair and a beard and it's Campbot going, my feet hurt. It's cold out. I want to be home. I have to walk around for 30 minutes while on camera.
We've been doing B-roll all day. I will say, like, the idea of Alex Moyer like laying out that shot in the parking lot, that shot made me scream laugh also.
Oh my god.
The circling drone shot that Jay brought up.
Oh yeah. No, some of them are like, what? Part of me is like, is this like, are they dissociating? Because like something like that is like dissociation, you know.
Yeah,
it's really sad because she.
But I don't think it's that wet.
Because she has this like really great eye for like some things, like just like shots, like you see the Washington Boys like car, and you see the $1 Million Extreme bumper sticker. Like she's a good eye for like little details that paint a story of who these people are.
Earlier, I think you mentioned or there's like a point with Texas, and he has like a Confederate flag ring. And instead of like making a critique or commentary on it, it zooms in and just it fills the shot. So like people like see, like just by the framing of it, it like makes, it
makes the comment. Yeah. It makes it draws its attention to it. It gives you texture to these people, but then it's like, and then there's just shots of like him walking next to a canal with like clothes that don't look like they fit very well.
I do appreciate that by the end of the movie, Cantbot has grown into and is beginning to look a lot like a Socrates, like just disheveled, sarcastic boy.
Yeah.
That shot of him on the bench with the disheveledness like made me, because it like matches up with the shots of him 2 years earlier. I'm like, has he been in the park ever since?
It's just Moyer just shows up. It's like, well, I left him in 2017 in this park. There he is. He's like surrounded by pigeons. He has his phone out,
and then you left.
He's sitting by like a power pole, so his phone is like charging.
Oh my god!
I did like the soundtrack. It was weird to find out that the song that they have in the scene where they're shooting guns, which is like a great scene, don't really understand its position in the film.
They love guns.
It's a
scary.
It's a $1 Million Extreme reference, I found out.
Oh, what?
Oh, that's fun. We love that.
See, they should have had a better $1 Million Extreme reference. They should have had them driving around in Miatas.
Oh my god! If it's an MDE reference, I won't get it.
Not missing much.
Yeah, no, it's just that's why I didn't get the reference at first. I was just like looking up that song, and then I found out that people are like, "Oh yeah, it's because it's like from a really famous skit on MDE or something." And I was like, "That seems a weird thing to add into your film," but all right. When I watched that with one of my roommates, he was losing his mind at it because he was just like, he's like, "Do they not understand how like incriminating this looks if they ever get arrested. And that was before one of them got arrested.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Like, that's footage
And
that they're
nothing
going to play at
happened.
your trial. Like, you know that, right?
It's like
God.
not just that, but it's like the song is like cop.
Yeah.
killer.
It's John Miles going, let's kill some cops tonight. I'm like, that's such, you're going to go to jail for this. You know that, right?
There could be an argument made about like the like them suddenly having like girlfriends and lifting weights and like everybody kind of bettering their lives is like there's a certain element of just like they have absolutely there's like a vacuum of scrutiny for a lot of these people, and for a lot of them this is like just an expression of like no one being around to be like, maybe you shouldn't blast school shooter while taking your gun out to you know, taking your gun out to the range or whatever.
To quote
Um,
to quote one of the subjects, I think it was Charles, you just do dumb shit so you can point to it. So you can show your friends. I don't know. He's like quoting like some old V meme. It was really funny how a lot of the times some of the subjects are making kind of abstract meme references. Like obviously a lot of what they're talking about does feel like they're fucking around a bit with Alex. The Xbox kid meme, you know, the best thing about the Xbox is is not just da 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 da, but showing people online that I did.
Oh, yeah.
showing my friends online that that's
Yeah,
an old one.
no.
Yeah,
Maybe
no,
that kid,
that's
hey,
in
maybe
there.
he is an old head. Maybe he knows.
Yeah, maybe. This is why he's dating a trans girl.
It's so funny that it's like, oh, I met her on R9K, and I like when they
her. It's like, okay, early on, it's like 95% of the people on 4chan are male. I met her on our.
when he like first like says like, oh, I have a girlfriend, and they show a photo of him, because they didn't show his friend, I thought that like his friend had just transitioned. I thought that's
the
what this
fucking
was gonna
face
be.
mask.
That would have been sexy. That would have been a serve.
But that kind of like ties into the thing of like the other problem with the film is the uncritical way it kind of accepts, because like the film presents as like, oh, he got a girlfriend as like that's progress, and it's like, is it?
Yeah,
Is it
not
like,
really.
It's like I know
The guy started lifting
I know
weights.
It happens.
I mean,
They
that's
just-
something.
Like I just, again, like I can reference my roommate. It's just like they go from being incels to being really abusive men in relationships.
Or like, even if he's a great boyfriend, it's like, hey, it's his first relationship. You know what people in their first relationships are bad at? Understanding that relationship will probably end and being in a relationship. So like, what is he gonna do when if he gets out of that
Yeah.
relationship? Like, it's the film acknowledges that these guys have depression, but then is like, no, they're doing fine now because they're dating and,
They're doing
and,
fine.
and
I have a
working out.
girlfriend.
And it's like, that's
you
not
know, that's not.
that's not what they need. They need like support.
It's not gonna come out at weird times. It's gonna. God,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're nice
Which,
boys.
like, you know-
I'm sure they're doing fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not to
I
say
mean,
anything about him or his relationship. It's just like the film presenting getting a girlfriend as like progress is like that. You don't like show me any time with this guy after. Like, okay, how is
Yeah.
he doing now that he has a girlfriend?
This feeds into that stupid classist stereotype of all these angry young men who are just awful because they can't have sex.
Yeah, it
Is that the movie just is that?
it just recreates that whole logic.
Yeah.
But like in a hopeful way instead of a condemning way, I guess.
Finally got the GF. It's over.
Finally.
It's like no.
They finally achieved normalcy, and now their life may begin.
The problem isn't that
Now they can.
Yeah.
they can't measure up to these traditional values. So the problem, the solution to that is that by the end of the film, they will match up to those traditional values. We'll cut them to make them fit.
God. Oh God. Great movie.
God. Yeah, what a masterpiece. Two thumbs up.
It is a hoot and a holler to watch with people. I will say that.
Yeah. I would recommend that, like, if you've spent any time on, like, 4chan and shit, it's not really, like, as much, it's not as much, like, as we've been saying, like, a salient documentary piece that leads you down a specific, like, conclusion or anything, as much as it is just, like, a bunch of strangers fucking around, and talking about isolation and what that does to your personality and what it can do to your ideology if you spend time on the internet, which a lot of us do.
I will say an interesting book to read is a complement to this, especially because it gets more into the darker, like, troll raid aspects of those cultures, is This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, which does have the academia thing of, like, diagrams of memes in it. But it's interesting
We love
because the researcher, like, spent, like, a year or two, like, embedded in troll groups, like, who were, like the do you guys remember, like, Facebook memorial trolling?
Yeah.
She's, like, embedded in, like, a group of those people. Like, she gets a bunch of their trust and stuff, and, like, just, like, gets to know them, like, not on a personal level, like, she doesn't know who they are, but on a level of, like, kind of gets, like, a theory of, like, what do they get out of this and, like, what drives it. It's a really interesting read, and there's, like, a really good part in it where she talks about having to go on this radio show, and then, like, she finds out at the last minute that, like, the father of a girl whose memorial page was raided by that group is going to be on it, and she's talking to the group about it, and one of them is just like, oh, you don't have to, like, defend us, right? Which is, like, a really good point about, like, the ways in which, like, you try to document and understand these things while also kind of, like, putting a distance between, like, understanding and like, maybe necessarily approving of their behavior.
Yeah, and that's why so much of trolling is just kind of a fart in the wind, because it's like it doesn't really exist without a reaction, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is not me trying to sound like a cool, like, liberal, soccer mom about it. It just kind of is what it is.
Whatever this movie is trying to be, I think the only way a successful iteration of it could exist is by someone who actually lived it and, like, understands the psychology, until that happens. And I think the trajectory of the people in this film is that, seems like they're learning how to, I guess, mask. And I think that will come eventually, and I'm looking forward to that, because obviously these people are all, getting into literature and, like, whatever. So some interesting art will come around out of this subculture, I guess you could say. It is solid 7 out of 10. I don't know. I don't even fucking know.
Well, actually, our rating system is we decide what we would rather have spent the money we spent on and what we wouldn't have rather spent the money that we spent on.
I didn't
so, like,
spend a fucking
let's
thing.
say,
What do you let's say
then I guess you're
This
exempt
movie
from
was
the
worthless.
review.
let's say the movie let's say it hurt your ratio. What are you?
Oh, my ratio. Okay, let's say that I get called out for something relating to this podcast. I'd say
Yeah.
it's worth
Which we all will.
It's worth 500 followers.
All right, yeah.
I don't.
Hell fucking
I love the idea of weighing a film by how many followers it's worth losing to talk about.
Dude, that
Actually, yeah, let's just go with that as a rating
never
scheme.
mind Bitcoin, never mind Magic the Gathering. It's going to be all about follower numbers. I'm going to create a company just like Enron. Enron tried to make a futures trading platform for bandwidth. I'm going to do that, but for Twitter followers. We're going to be trading. We're going to be putting puts on and shorts and long positions on follower positions or like follower counts, and we're gonna have like some really stable. I mean, we're already going in that direction. Elon Musk's company value is based off of his tweets now.
I'm just imagining like a stock floor where like someone's running around like this account just got like the Mary Wilson retweet, like buy.
That's real, though.
Everybody
real.
I know has talked about the Mary Wilson like retweet effect, where you get retweeted by her and your mentions just like flood, like you just get like your notification bar just explodes for like 6 hours.
Holy shit!
I would say I would theoretically be okay with losing. Like 200 followers, just take a little off the top.
The cost of having a nuanced take on this fucking movie.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine. I could probably take like 1,000. Like I always think that I have less followers than I actually do. So to me, it's really easy to just be like, yeah, like if that puts me back down to that number, yeah, I don't care.
I think like 5,000 followers is when you like just like all fun on Twitter has left the building.
All fun's left the building.
5,000 followers is when Sadie Doyle will have an opinion about your Twitter.
Fuck.
Finally.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All right.
Yeah, no, this was super fun.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. This was awesome.
It was a pleasure to be on. I love your whole thing. I love the show. It's great. I recommend it all the time.
Oh, thank you.
Yay! Thank you. And thank you all so much for listening. We regret to inform you that we have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/filmcritters, you can hear all episodes 3 days early, and you can also watch a Patreon exclusive series that we do, Film Critters Throws It Back, where we just talk about whatever fucking movies we want to talk about, as voted by you, from whatever era, not just shit that just came out at South by Southwest that was canceled.
And if I could plug my shit, I'd just like to put my Twitter up.
Yeah.
There. Party Pratt.
Please.
PRATYPRAT. Yeah, that's all I wanted to
And
say.
we'll put a link to that. We'll put a link to your Welcome to Your Life post.
Yeah, that'll be in the description. Yeah, please go check out Gabby's writing. Go follow her on Twitter.
Yeah, go read my 1 hour long read post about global hegemony and power dynamics.
It's good.
I contextualize.
Do you want me to draw your little?
What?
Do you want me to draw your little critter icon, or do you want it to be an MS Paint?
Oh,
Gab?
sure. You please. I would love to see your take.
Okay. But the MS Paint Gabs are also good.
They're really good. I do them on my Patreon, which you can see on my Twitter. If anyone's interested, I guess. Patreon. Plug Zone.
Plug Zone. Well, yeah. Thank you for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the episode. And I don't know. Hope you enjoyed TFW No GF, I guess.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. Bye. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Bye.